much for coming here today. We are basically here for the TOC Policy Exchange on the Central Provident Fund. Before we start, I'd just like everyone to observe a short moment of silence for the victims of MH17. So if you join me, please. Thank you very much. Okay, yes, thanks for being here. And I think I should really start off by saying to TOC readers and audience that basically we've tried to arrange for this session for quite a while. Somehow never managed to be able to get everyone together, as well as in terms of funding. So there were some difficulties, and but good that we are finally able to get this together. So I think what we are trying to do is try to get a little bit more understanding about what are the issues and the concerns around CPF, and also to think of some proposals for the way forward. The government is actually looking into a revision of the CPF. We don't know what it will entail, but we would like to offer our proposals as well for this one. So it's very good to have the various representatives here. Very happy also to have Kenneth from a Reform Party, as well as James from SDP, who will be offering their party's position on this. So maybe I'll just like to start by asking, maybe Kenneth, to basically share with us what is RP's position on the CPF and what you guys are, do you have any plans or proposals for it?
Well, we put forward a short white paper on which is a starting point for discussions. I think there's a fundamental conflict at the heart of CPF, in that it was originally, its purpose was more as a source of cheap financing for the government, first for industrialization, and then afterwards was used as a convenient way of financing the growth of the sovereign wealth funds. As a result of this forced saving, very high level of forced saving, there's been continuous upward pressure because there's been a huge current account surplus. There's been a lot of pressure on the Singapore dollar, which has reduced the value of GIC's investments in foreign currencies. CPF invests in special Singapore government securities, which are then lent to GIC. So what Reform Party proposes is that instead of such a high level of compulsory saving, we would reduce it to probably keeping the employer component the same, but reduce the compulsory level of employee saving to 10%. Plus, we would allow people to voluntarily save up to another 10% of income.
So is it something they can opt in
yes.
into?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and then we would use part of probably the current Medisave component as a basis for funding a universal health insurance scheme. More details on that later. But the idea is that that would be, it would be earmarked for that. And apart from that, a small proportion of the current CPF contributions would go toward funding a basic old age pension, say between $300 and $500 a month. And if people didn't have, people would be eligible for that, Singaporeans would be eligible for that, provided they had contributed for a certain number of years into CPF. Credit would be given for parents taking care of children for those years, and also for disabled people who were not able to work.
So what you're saying is that you're really looking at a pension model that is not based on the total amount that you have in your CPF. It's more like...
Well, there would be a subsidy or top-up from the government towards those who had not accumulated sufficient savings. Plus, we would then throw open the CPF system to competition from private pension providers as well, for the amount contributions over and above that necessary to fund the health insurance and the basic old age pension. And on top of that, we would also want CPF, the management or board of CPF to fulfill their fiduciary responsibilities to get the best possible returns. So they wouldn't automatically invest with GIC, but would be free to pick other investment managers.
I see.
For savings.
So in that sense, whatever risk level that people are comfortable with, what kind of investment scheme they want.
I mean, obviously CPF would be, people would be able to choose, yes, private pension providers as suiting their level of risk. If they left it with CPF, CPF would be restricted to certain safe or AAA or AA investment rated securities.
But this will be over and above the 300 to 500 that you're talking about, is it?
Yeah, this is for the additional contributions.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll just go quickly with James, because I think we spoke just now, and basically I think it's a slightly different model than SDPS.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I think we all recognize that, currently the CPF funds does three main things: retirement, housing, and healthcare. So I think, any reform of the CPF system, needs to be approached in a holistic manner. So I think we have decoupled, and tackled them also as additional policy matters, one on the healthcare and one on public housing. In terms of healthcare, broadly, we are looking at some form of universal health insurance, where citizens can be looked after for their health needs. So this will immediately decouple the forced saving in MediSave. So under that policy initiative, MediSave will be decoupled, and the MediSave amounts will be pushed back into the CPF. For the housing, we introduced non-open market housing, where the formulation is the price of the housing will not take into account land costs, because that's a public good that is from the state, but certainly factoring in building materials as well as administrative costs. That policy initiative places the price of housing between 70,000 for a 2-room flat and up to 240,000 for 5-room flat. So again, you can see that the amount of money that would be deducted under the current CPF model would be very much less in the new non-open market scheme. So this then, of course, keeps the CPF, we hope, in a more healthy position. Broadly, through our discussions, we kind of put something like 15% might be a good percentage in which one could save for retirement, and that's in line with other studies elsewhere. It's still slightly above I think international average in terms of percentage amounts, but that is our approach. CPF in particular, I think maybe just the one point to start off with, I think the minimum sum promise needs to be kept. We said 55, and that's a kind of a social contract that we have come into, and that's why there's so much expectation from the citizenry, that amount they can access. But of course, we do recognize that the retirement age has since shifted as well, and perhaps there's room for dialogue between 55 and the retirement age. And ultimately, any fundamental, policy shift needs to require further discussion and elaboration, and our position recognizes that point. So I'll leave that for now, and we can, chat further.
I think you mentioned the concerns that people have about the minimum sum and the issues regarding retirement. In fact, when TOC went to do a report on the protest that was organized by Roy and Han Hui Hui, and the one that basically, the very first one that had, which basically attracted more than 3,000 people. Maybe we talked to people, and basically the sense we get is that people are very concerned about minimum sum. Maybe
sorry, can I just, I forgot to add, yes, we believe that everybody should have the option to take out the majority of their CPF at 55. A apart from that, necessary to fund the basic annuity. So we're looking at the return as opposed to the CPF.
Right.
And as regards housing, we do think that the fact that it's one of the few investment opportunities has led to an unsustainable asset price boom. So we want to gradually decouple the idea of saving for retirement from purchase of property.
I think the sense that we get is that people don't feel comfortable about the minimum sum, chiefly because they don't see themselves being able to meet the sum. I mean, there's housing that's coming in that's having to basically pay for the children's education. I might be wrong, and Arifin, you want to just elaborate a bit more about what are some of the sentiments that you're hearing on the ground at the protest, for instance?
As you said, one of the main concerns that they have is the minimum sum, because some see it as shifting goalposts, some seeing it as like they keep on increasing it, so they are not able to, in a way, see their hard-earned savings. But on another hand, a lot of people there, like the protest attracted a lot of retirees, so this CPF doesn't affect them, but they actually there for support of Roy, and also like this whole idea of political oppression, suppression of your opponents and all, they are actually against the whole idea.
Okay, but also basically it's supporting Roy in terms of what the Prime Minister is doing.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm not very sure whether they're supporting the CPF or not. But I think we do get a sense that there are some concerns about the CPF, as well as basically Roy being seen as victimized in that sense. Let's not go too much into Roy at this point in time. Let's take a look at, I guess, if we were to look at, I think both Kenneth as well as James talk about basically taking apart the system in the sense of relooking the system and what is it, how is it we can separate healthcare from what is essentially a pension fund. I don't know whether, Paul, if you have anything to say.
I'd like to build on a little bit on what James has talked about. See, to try and do so many things with one fund is just too complicated. And there's so many people who will turn around and say, I've got all this money in my CPF, and yet I have to borrow money or I have to sell my flat in order to pay for my healthcare. So that doesn't seem to really make sense. So that's the whole idea of decoupling housing, retirement, and healthcare. So the idea is that we use the mechanism of CPF, where people are used to the idea of putting in a certain amount of money every month, and their employers put in a certain amount of money. And we use that to buy a truly universal national health insurance. We're not talking about a MediShield Life thing where you still have to pay the first $2,000, which covers the vast majority of your hospitalization. You're still paying for it in cash at MediSave. MediShield Life is a great catastrophic life insurance, health insurance policy. But when we talk about universal, we're talking about the common things that people have. See? So that's the idea, is that we decouple CPF from health insurance, because people need their primary care taken care of. See, it doesn't make sense that you don't get your high blood pressure taken care of, you wait until you have a catastrophic stroke, and then your MediShield Life kicks in. Because currently, you get CHAS and all the restrictions around CHAS before you get your primary care looked after. It's means tested at various complicated different levels. So if we have a very simple universal health insurance card, which is what has been suggested in the SDP proposal, and incidentally, I'm here in my own capacity, not under the SDP. But there are many people across Singapore who have called for a universal health insurance program, and I think it can be decoupled from retirement.
Ming Sing, you have anything to share about this? Because you did mention some examples from around the world.
Well, first of all, what is CPF for? It's actually for retirement. And not only for retirement, it's just to make sure that the government is not bogged down by retirement financing. So CPF is basically a self-finance thing. But in the end, we found that the PAP comes to the end of the savings. It forces people to buy annuity. So it's a contradicting.
Which is it's a CPF Life.
Yeah. It's actually a contradicting concept, because CPF started with a self-financing lifestyle, the choice. Then you come to an annuity, which means that other people is going to finance those who live longer. Those who died earlier will finance those who live longer, which doesn't make sense to me, right? It basically means that the government now says, I'm not going to spend money, any sense of your retirement financing, and you are going to, as a group, you are going to deal with it within this pool of money. The same for MediShield Life. The government is not going to spend any money, right? You are going to deal with it among yourself. So, in the end, we should ask, what is the role of government? Right? If it's not going to take care of your medical care, right? It's not going to take care of your retirement financing, then what else? Right? So, come back to this choice. Everybody have a different lifestyle, right? I may not choose to retire in Singapore. So do I have a choice to withdraw my money and retire somewhere else? Right? Choice again. I do not want my government to meddle with my investment of a CPF. I want to have a choice of deciding what type of risk portfolio, what type of investment I want for my retirement. Right? Of course, in order for this to happen, to people to make an informed choice, the education system must include a curriculum on finance management. This is to raise the standards of citizens of knowing how to manage their life, their finances. And hopefully, in the end, we do not need the government money that much. But this is a caveat. At the end of the day, if any of us is unable to take care of ourselves, the role of the government should step in, whether it's Medicare, right, whether it's retirement financing. That's the baseline. So if we are looking into that direction, then the whole system of minimum sums is actually rubbish. Why should you dictate how much should I have as a minimum for my lifestyle? I can choose very different lifestyle after I retire, right? So minimum sum should not exist.
Actually, we had a question in Parliament on the minimum sum. It was posed by Lawrence Lian, basically, because the Minister Tan Yuen Yen did say that 1,200 is basically the sort of the subsistence required. Of course, the position that Lawrence Lian put out was that 1,000 may be sufficient for some, but really might be too little for others.
Yes.
Yeah. So that choice of lifestyle that comes in.
Well, I have a choice of lifestyle. I have a choice of making money out of my retirement funds. Right? I can take out my retirement funds. I go invest in some properties overseas. Take out the rental to sustain my life. Why not? Why should I be constrained by the rules that you can only put in CPF and earn that miserable 4 to 5% return?
I mean, when minimum sum started off, it was only like $30,000, and then it's risen by something like over 400% since 1988, while the CPI has only gone up by 68%. So, you know, there seem to be, it's not transparent why minimum sum needs to be so big.
Yes.
Also, why most people's HDB, their equity, is worth considerably more than the minimum sum. So why can't they pledge their HDB against the whole of the minimum sum?
That is the point I also want to touch on, that effectively this pledging of property, I mean, personally, I'm not too sure exactly what it entails. Does it mean to say that the government takes over your property or something like that?
No, it means that when you pledge a property, at any time of your retirement, you sell your property, half of it, that means that amount have to go into the CPF. You cannot take it out. That means whatever proceeds from the sales will be locked into your retirement funding. Why should that be? If I want to choose the lifestyle I want to sell out, I move to somewhere else to live my lifestyle.
Because we basically
Yeah.
enjoy your retirement in some place that
Yeah, which is cheaper,
Thailand.
right? Thailand,
Yeah.
Vietnam.
Yeah.
You know, why should I constrained by my government in that sense? So, having looked at these fundamental things with regard to choice, right? You come back to the system and you look at around the world. I think James would have to tell you about Australian system. the Hong Kong system, they only pay 5% for the MPF, right? Then they do not use it for Medicare. They did not use it for housing, purely for retirement. And the people can choose whichever mutual funds managers they want, and the type of funds with different risk portfolio they want in terms of percentage. They can actually manage in different percentage of the risk they want to take. And they should be the one who is responsible for their own investment, not the government. We do not want the government to guarantee, put it that way. We can manage if we are educated enough in knowing what investment risk is. Right?
James, you wanted to add?
So in the Australian system, I recall when I was teaching in Australia, if you're in the academic sector, you get 17% superannuation, and every year you have a choice in terms of how you want that money to be managed. So you have the low risk, which gives you very small returns, and you have up to about 4 choices, and you can pick how your superannuation is invested based on your risk appetite. And that is something, also I think we need to think about when we look at the CPF. The other issue is really consumer price index, whether the returns that we get 2.5 or 4% of MediSave, keeps up with inflation. So it seems, the general view is that it's not keeping up with inflation, and then that brings in the whole debate about are we getting fair returns on the CPF monies that has been held by the state for so long. So I think these are other areas where we need to sort of get into. If you look at Thailand, again, their social security system is different, but you will see that the healthcare system is decoupled, the housing is decoupled. There are different mechanisms in which the Thai citizens are looked after. So coming back, I think the fundamental problem that we have is that too many things are being brought to bear on one particular fund, which was originally set up for retirement. And a good way forward, I think, for all Singaporeans is if we can have some decoupling of the various sectors and manage them that way.
Plus, I mean, there's also the worry about that we are putting all the eggs in one basket. I mean, it's not good enough for the finance minister to tell us that the Singapore government is AAA. If we're taking our money and investing it in illiquid securities, equities, I mean, we can look at the statement of assets and liabilities, and maybe there's not much of a cushion between our CPF and what sort of loss would require us for the CPF actually to become insolvent. So that's a worry as well, and that's why it needs to be decoupled from the government, really.
But the sense that I get is that for the longest time we are more or less comfortable, or people are more or less comfortable with the government doing what it wants with our CPF money. But in recent, I would say, months, probably even years, what we are seeing is that people are less certain about where the money is going for a start. It's got a lot to do, I guess, with the what is perceived as a lack of transparency in where our money is going. So I wonder if any of you might have and everything. I mean, on that point about transparency.
Because, like, for example, for the past, I think up to year 2000, there was a report by the ex-finance minister saying that our CPF was invested in Temasek Holdings, but now they say it is not. And then it is only recently that we know for sure that our CPF are invested in the GIC, but it took us 30 years to know that. So, like, there's whole issue on transparency. And then
I think you're going to get kind of started. We know
it is not entirely correct to say that CPF is not invested in Temasek.
Well, if it's not going into Temasek directly, it frees up government resources to put into Temasek. And
So it's left pocket, right?
we don't find it convincing. The government says, "Oh, we're not saying everybody will go to Batam and splurge and spend all their money, but some of you will, and would you take care of those others?" But the government is, on its own figures, is making a surplus of over $30 billion a year. What is that money to be used for? Why do we, why do we need it?
I guess, will it make a difference if the government is really a bit more transparent about where is invested money? Why is it that you can't get the full amount? I mean, what do you guys think?
Well, I think that's the minimum. It needs to be transparent, about GICs and Temasek's returns and valuations.
I think transparency is a general problem with the
It's a must-have.
My view is, if you do not have the right to dictate your money where it goes to, there's no transparency.
Okay, different level of
Right.
transparency.
The biggest transparency you will have is exactly where you put your funds and what's the return at the end of the year. You do not even need the government to be meddle with it. That's the full transparency you can have.
So it goes back to choice in that sense.
Yes,
So
choice.
if you don't trust the government enough to actually want to put your money where it wants to, you have an option to take it out somewhere else, and the risk is up to you in that sense.
Yeah. I mean, do we have a choice to invest in GIC? I want to invest in GIC.
You mean you want to invest more?
Yes, why not? But with a full return from GIC, not a reduced return, which say they guarantee you with a reduced return. Why should I have a guarantee with a reduced return? It's absurd, right?
I mean, just on that point, I think it goes back to what Mr. Taman actually said. He's basically saying that the key drive behind CPF is really sustainability. And how is it? I mean, it's noted as one of the best in the world, and it's the safest. You get a guaranteed returns. Don't you feel that this will be something that citizens will want? Paul?
Yeah, okay, again, not as an expert on this, there are two things. First thing is that this whole point about transparency, even if we don't get the full transparency where we have the right to do what we want with our money, somebody has made the comparison with, say, the Norwegian State Pension Fund. There's a very detailed account, who's on the board of directors, what is their distance from the government, what are the companies they've invested in, how much they've invested in each different area. So if the Norwegian State Pension Fund can do that, the question is why our sovereign wealth funds are unable to provide that kind of information, which is barely at the, just giving us information, not necessarily giving us the right to do what we want.
So, okay, but maybe I'll just let you share a bit more on the Norwegian example, since Paul brought it up.
Yeah,
I mean, what are some of the mechanisms they have in place?
I can just do a very quick comparison between the Norwegian fund and the Singaporean fund. So firstly, the Norwegian fund, they use state resources. They use oil to invest instead of like we use CPF money.
We don't have oil.
Not oil, yeah.
But that's the base in economics. That's the reason for a sovereign wealth fund, because you're converting wealth in the ground, or mineral wealth, into a long-term capital. But why do we have a sovereign wealth fund? I don't know.
Because our wealth is actually with the people's money.
Yeah.
Okay, that's
Yeah, so also they publish the salaries, the wages of the board of directors. In Singapore, we don't know the remunerations of the board of directors.
you're talking about for
GIC, right?
Okay.
But Norway is transparent.
I see, right? Okay.
And there are no politicians on the board of directors. In Singapore, we have Prime Minister and 2 Deputy Prime Ministers,
Okay, right.
total of 5 politicians. And they disclose their total holdings. GIC only states that it manages well over $100 billion, over $100 billion US dollars. Then another thing is Norway, it publishes a list of all its real estate holdings, all its bonds and all its equities that it's holding, but 0 for GIC. But it is estimated that this Norway's fund is about 3 times bigger than Singapore's GIC. So if they can do it, why can't we?
The sense that I'm getting is the reason why there's a call for transparency is really, I guess not just because we're comparing it to other countries, but people feel a little bit unsafe. So while the minister might say that, oh, your money is safe with us, it's guaranteed, but it's probably a sense that people are getting that my returns should be greater. And I cannot see this because, I mean, you get GIC announcing oh, these are my returns, it's so good and so good, but yet this is the amount that's coming into my CPF.
Well, not exactly so, but if CPF is what they say, they invest in GICs, we have a lot of worries because GIC only invests overseas, and there's a forex risk involved. Right? If it's invested in Temasek, then I'm pretty sure that we will be less worried because most of the Temasek assets is in Singapore. So whatever you earn is in Sing dollars. You do not face the forex risk. So GIC actually changed their reporting of their returns in US dollars. But $1 20 years ago, exchange rate is totally different from now. So we might be making a loss instead of a gain in Sing dollars, even if we make a gain in US dollars. So that is a cause of concern when they try to mingle around with their reporting system. So that's why I'm totally not trusting PAP to deal to meddle with my CPF money in that sense. Right?
Yeah. So on that note, whether it's when you press them for transparency, whether they change the reporting or they change the shelving of children's books in the National Library Board, I think you're dealing with a particular kind of beast. The PAP government has been in power for so long. I think trying to squeeze transparency out of it, this is what you get. So while I think it's good that we as citizens or members of alternative parties have proposals to try to remedy the situation, I think the ultimate proof in the pudding is just to get rid of a regime that is really adverse to transparency. And the example of whether changing shelves or changing reporting methods is just very indicative of what we are dealing with. So I think there's a policy innovation, that we are discussing about at one stand, and then finally, saying, okay, we got to get rid of this lot, and start working from scratch. So I think these are very real approaches to how we deal with whether it's CPF as a policy issue or whether it's housing or healthcare. And that's something I think we need to take on board.
Absolutely. With the budget every year, the government or the PAP keep from us exactly what type of surplus we're making and the resources available. And even use this charade of putting, which I brought up at Hari Kumar Forum, where he said, we're dealing with reality here. This charade that the net investment returns contribution is supposed to be for actual spending, but actually it's channeled into another fund, and it's not actually spent at all. So there's something, the more they go through this charade, the more people suspect that maybe there are difficulties with GIC. It's illiquid or insolvent, can't realize the valuations, and they're desperate to stop paying out cash.
Okay, I think maybe we won't go into the speculations as to what how much Temasek and GIC is withholding. But I think if I were to look at it from the perspective as a citizen, if I were to want a certain amount of stability in my retirement funds, right? And if the government is in that sense taking on the responsibility to put all the money into one pocket and giving out this certain percentage to you in terms of benefits in that sense, and it's basically calling on trusts to basically okay, we're managing this, okay. What changed then? From the past, people are quite okay with that.
I think what changed was the moving goalposts that Arifin was talking about. Because I can't remember who it was, but someone else said, the government is guaranteeing a certain return, but how are they guaranteeing it? It's we are the government. You see, we are the people who are the taxpayers. So essentially, if they get below a return, they can just change the withdrawal age. They can change the minimum sum. So, that's us guaranteeing ourselves. And I think in the past, when the rules were fixed, I don't know when it started being changed in the mid-1980s or something like that, people accepted it, for the first 20 years or so. But when the rules started being changed every now and again, then people got really upset. And as you pointed out earlier on, when suddenly the news came out that the minimum sum was not going to be $155,000, then you get 3,000 people showing up in Hong Lim. So people are upset because it's not just this particular change, but the fact that you can change at will without going to a referendum, without putting it out to a vote, without meaningful representation in Parliament, and people start to get worried.
And also, absentee MPs in Parliament. So I think overall, I think we see a citizen awakening. Not just, I mean, we are talking about CPF, and let's continue to keep the focus there. But I think we cannot discuss it in isolation. We have to look at the whole range of policy issues that are hurting Singaporeans, and I think there is a certain awakening of Singaporeans who are more interested in sort of dissecting and scrutinizing these frequent changes in policy positions just to accommodate this current regime. So I think policy innovation is one, but regime change is also something that we need to think about if we want to effect the kind of policy changes we want. I mean, on one hand, I think I only trust this government so much to actually take on board good suggestions. I mean, ultimately, if you want to make change, you've got to do it yourself.
I mean, I agree with James. We need to vote them out. They won't answer the questions and provide transparency.
A couple more years. It's coming.
I just wanted to say also on the theme of the government about Parliament, a lot of stuff which, in the opinion of many, should go through Parliament actually doesn't, like executive decisions on lending our money to a loan commitment to the IMF. Effectively, they could loan all our money to other countries or supranational bodies, and we couldn't do anything about it.
For the
and
fact
even the courts, because I took them to court over the IMF loan commitment, and we would, the judge's decision was that we can't even challenge it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think we mentioned about the frequency of change and being transparent, but even for things like, let's say the minimum sum that Hong mentioned is a moving goalpost. It's quite clear. But at this stage, I'm still not very clear actually as to how they actually decide on this value, this quantum increase. Minister has clarified in Parliament. Effectively, they're talking about a base amount of 4,000 plus inflation. But where is that 4,000 coming from? I might be clear on this. I don't know whether.
Also, there's another issue. I mean, they say that it's necessary to provide an income of 1,200 based on current interest rates. So if interest rates rise, will they reduce the minimum sum and give the money back because you can earn higher returns on an annuity?
Yeah, but that assumption is based on the fact that your inflation is perpetually going up, the cost of living is going up.
Yeah. And they're also, extending the age at which you can draw down on this annuity is inequitable because, as research has shown, even though life expectancy has risen, primarily the biggest rise in life expectancy is for the rich and the wealthy, and for those, in the US, a study showed, I think that the top 50% life expectancy had risen by about 5 years over the last 20 years, but for the bottom 50% it had risen by a year at most.
Can I add on that? Actually, Leong Si-Hian posted an article yesterday based on the average death age of deaths last year. 38.9% of the people who died last year were below 69 years old.
Okay.
So that, like what he said, there's quite a large number of people who actually pass away before the drawdown age.
And they will probably be lower income, who need it more.
So, things like needing an income to basically get their healthcare needs, that kind of things, So I guess the sense that basically we do need to separate the different pots as to how it's basically take apart CPF. Basically we look at the system itself.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. Those are people who cannot rise up from the grave, and I'll be interested to know whether those numbers are, of Singaporeans or Singapore citizens.
Yeah, Singapore citizens.
Yeah, so that's a very sad fact, and that is why I think in the second protest that I had the opportunity to attend, I think just as a participant observation perspective, you can see quite a bulk of the people who are attending those protests were people who were perhaps close to 55. So it was a really big concern for them, and that's the issue of empowerment over your own monies. I recall that some years, even a decade or so ago, people would actually look fondly on reaching 55, where they would look to start a business, send a child for further education, fund a marriage, go on a holiday. That kind of, empowerment is missing. In fact, in many cases, most people don't make the minimum sum. So there's really nothing there to kind of look forward to. I mean, barring the reality, yes, there were a couple of stories where people did mismanage funds and so on. But if we are looking at that, then we have our casinos and more that is leading us all astray that way. The World Cup betting, for example, also burned a lot of holes in the pocket. So I guess that issue of keeping a promise, of at least having people access some part of their money at 55 needs to be honored.
Just on that point, I think, do you get a sense that effectively we are looking at a situation when, because of CPF, we have grown in a way to be reliant on government to basically cover everything for us?
I don't think that is the case. There are three premises made in the system right now. The first premise is the government is not going to take care of you for retirement. So the government doesn't want to take care of you. That's why they set up a system that make you to manage the funds for you, right? And the second premise is Singaporeans cannot manage their funds, right? That's why we cannot choose what we want to invest. We cannot choose to take out our money and manage the funds for our retirement, right? And of course, the third one, we are all stupid, right? To actually place a trust on an opaque system and continue to buy into the PAP government's sales of trust me, I keep changing, you still trust me, right? I think that's silly. No, if I'm going to sign a contract with a business partner in China or Vietnam, right, to say that, okay, I loan you this, you're going to pay me that. The next thing you say, you know that when after I give the money, I say, oh no, we change the terms. Will you trust them?
It's a fine print.
Yeah, well, fine print or not, but that is a matter of a business. In business world, you cannot to change the terms on your own.
I guess then the idea is that really once we've taken apart this whole thing, and once the government devolves a bit more of this responsibility to the people, the onus then becomes on us to basically manage our money properly. And I mean, for the greater part of Singapore's history, I guess people are relatively okay with the government being able to manage this on our behalf. Not take our money, but effectively manage this the funds on our behalf. Not so trusting nowadays. So if we are to break up the system right now, it's up to us to basically get financially educated.
Okay, talking about breaking this system, if we have the CPF for housing and medicine, what will happen is there will be overspending in housing as well as Medicare. Because to us, the logic is if we can't see our money, we spend it.
I mean, that's what's happened.
That's happening.
There's been over-investment, and because the government controls the supply of housing, prices have shot up.
So the liquidity that we put in through the CPF actually boosts up the housing prices. That's why they call it asset enhancement scheme, but it's actually a property bubble that we are moving. And if you remember, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, staying in a hospital is not that expensive. But why is it expensive now? Because people have this unseen money that they presume that is not theirs, they can just spend it. And that's why it keeps going up.
Sorry,
That's
on
absolutely
healthcare,
true. In fact, when people ask me to explain how the Medisave scheme works, and what I tell them is I put in a certain amount of money, my employer puts in a certain amount of money, and I can only use this money for certain approved medical procedures. Now, what happens in medical school is the top students go into orthopedics, eye and ear, nose and throat, because those are very lucrative and they've got good quality of life. So what happens is you start working at say 29, 30, then you work for 10 years, you haven't had a chance to use your Medisave. You're 40 years old, you get pain in your knee. You go and see this really smart guy who's an orthopedic surgeon, and he says, you have all this money sitting in your Medisave, I can put a titanium knee in your knee for $20,000. And then you say, okay, I'll do it. This money is just sitting there doing nothing. He puts it in. Then he says to you, didn't that feel good? I can do your other knee for another $20,000. So you get the other knee done for $20,000. Then you're 50 years old, you get a heart attack. And then the guy comes around and says, I can put this extra special stent in there for $30,000. Then by the time you get cancer, there's no money left in your Medicare. And you've got to tap on your children, your brothers, your sisters, and everybody like that. Yeah. And that's the sad reality of what goes on with Medisave.
In that sense, I think we are from a housing perspective. I mean, I remember when I bought my flat as well. It's the same thing. It's like they tell you, oh, you have enough, so we just go ahead and spend. Just drag the loan on.
Yes.
There are very clear issues with that.
Yes,
in that sense.
correct.
Yeah.
It's overspending. Overspending in housing. And the most important of all, it presumes that everybody can live 80 years old,
right.
Which is not right. I may have a cancer right now. I can't even see when I'm going to live for the next 10 years. And you want me to say, oh, you put in the life annuity is good for you. Does it make sense?
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense. Right?
I was going to point out that actually you can withdraw your CPF if your life expectancy is severely diminished or you've got a terminal illness. But obviously for those who collapse and die of a heart attack, it doesn't help. I mean, the number one concern from what we hear from residents, walking the ground and meeting residents, is that, this is the number one issue really at the moment with CPF and the increase in minimum sum.
And apart from minimum sum, the other thing that I think kind of didn't come out in our discussion today is accessing CPF monies in between when there is unemployment. So people want to have some kind of access to their own money. I think that needs some reflection as well, because that's a voice that's heard quite loudly on the ground. I don't think policy making shouldn't be elite-based, government-led. It should also have ground reactions, and I think we need a policy-making mechanism, not just for CPF but generally for Singapore, that is inclusive and not after the fact. So every time we have to push from the ground, we say, okay, we heard you, right? So we will now move the books to the adult section, right? But otherwise we'll burn it or pulp it, right? So I think in the same way, for the CPF, I think this particular issue of having access is important. In Australia, if you look at their pension fund, they have actually many mechanisms. So when you're unemployed, when you're a single mother, when you're looking after people with disability, you can access the state pension through Centrelink, to cater for the needs. So that kind of flexibility, I think, also is something that we need to think about and need to discuss as part of that overall rethinking about our CPF.
Well, the government is talking about reviewing the CPF, but what I can read from the Parliament, or rather what Minister said in Parliament, was that, I mean, the suggestions is that we could have different ways to let citizens manage their own investments in that sense, but not really be looking at the system as a whole, which is basically a lot of what we discussed today.
Yeah, and that comes back to the point, I think the only real review that will take place is in 2016 or earlier. Because all this review, I mean, who does the review involve? They review it among themselves and, have some selected discussion, you know, so I think we need to have a kind of a national review, and I think the time is at hand.
Yeah. I mean, talking about the CPF, there's the gap between, say, 55 and 65. I mean, I met a couple in Telok Blangah who are brother and sister living together, where the sisters had 2 legs amputated because of diabetes, but they can't access their CPF money. But you know, they need it now, or yeah, they need access to it, and that's, you know, a good example of why the system is inadequate.
I guess part of it is also the complexity of the system to get out such money. I mean, you mentioned that if you have catastrophic illness, you can apply. But I mean, if you do have catastrophic illness, is this what you want to? Is this what you really want to go through? Whether we can simplify the system?
Well, some people seemed unaware of it. Like I met a case, or a man came to see me who was suffering, just been diagnosed with cancer, and I had to point out to him that he could withdraw because he had about nearly $200,000 in his CPF, I think, because he'd sold his flat a few years ago.
Right.
But he wasn't aware of that.
That age-old concept of basically not wanting to touch whatever you have left so they can pass it on to your children. I mean, anyone has some thoughts about that? Has that changed, or?
I think you know, over time, given, you know, productivity and technological change, there's one certainty, but our children will be much better off than we are. So there's really no, you know, less necessity to leave savings to the children. But what you have at the moment is a system that, with this annuity and the extension of the drawdown age, in which people are, you know, the age at which they can enjoy their savings is being postponed for, you know, not no good financial reasons that I can see. Certainly not, you know, when there's a government which appears to be rolling in money on the face of it.
In the past, I mean, we could, you know, sort of somehow manage with this inadequate system, was because, you know, as part of, you know, Asian society, you know, so our support system is not just monetary, it's family, it's children, it's relatives, it's network. So a lot of the lapse, right? I mean, it's already built into our current MediSave. You know, if you don't have enough, you know, family, next of kin, everybody, you know, is sucked dry. But I think it's increasingly difficult because everyone has their own cost center. So that kind of, you know, social network is wearing thin, and therefore I think, you know, while we recognize, you know, we are Asian society, but we live in modern times, in modern city with high cost of living. You know, we are positioned as an international global center, and those are real costs. And we need to have a structure and support system in place so that these needs are looked after adequately as well. Yeah.
I'm still pro-choice. If I decide to give it to my daughter, so be it. But why will you force me into anything? Which I have, yeah. I'm still pro-choice in that sense.
I'm going to ask the youngest among us. Basically, I mean, how does it look like? How does it feel like to you looking forward and having such a scheme in place? I mean, do you foresee yourself supporting?
Maybe the first question to ask is, do you have any CPF?
No, probably not.
That would really be clear.
A little part-time job.
Part-time job,
So
okay.
there you go. So
Started already.
Started already. Okay, that's good. That's maybe not so good for you. Yeah. Okay. I guess what I'll really do is just to quickly summarize what is it that we discussed and ask each of you for your views on this. I think what I've gathered here is that there is a sense that basically the CPF system is trying to do too many things, and there's a need for us to basically separate things like separate the 3 basic components, which is basically the pension, the healthcare, as well as the housing. And but because of this separation, the government also needs to take a more holistic approach to evaluate each of these components according to their own policies. We have international examples here to basically give a suggestion as to what can and what should or should not be done. we are more or less agreeable that there should still be some kind of a basic annuity from the government, but most of it should really be about a choice to the people. What is it that they want to do with the bulk of their money? There is also we also discussed a little bit about the trust that we have in the government. Why is it that people used to be fairly confident in the government managing the money, but now not so? Part of it has got to do with the frequency changes, and really the lack of flexibility in the system, and essentially the sense that the government is not really listening to what is happening on the ground. There's a lot of grievances in how people feel towards CPF, the control of the money, the returns they were getting, and it's really about trying to reach out to people and to get a better sense of this. So maybe I'll just start with Paul, if you have any last comments.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. I mean, I think healthcare is so important because healthcare actually, people are not healthy, are not able to contribute economically, their sense of well-being, a lot of these things are affected. And it's just not cost effective to wait until you get really, really sick and then throw in a catastrophic insurance policy. See, a final plug would be to really have good primary care so that your basics are taken care of.
Well, I think as we are forced to save too much. We are forced to over-invest in housing. It's not linked to, as Paul put it, Medisave is not a cost-effective scheme, and we are forced to over-invest in medical care. We'd be better off with a comprehensive health insurance scheme with some kind of central controls. And the CPF system, needs to be decoupled from providing cheap financing for the government to speculate or to generate extra revenues which don't come back to us. So, we want it open to competition. But if the government, fails to provide transparency, then as James said, we agree that we need regime change.
Couple more years. Arifin.
For me, I agree that with James and Kenneth that we need to separate housing and healthcare from the CPF, and also if we continue to give feedback, give alternative policies and all, but they're still not getting it, and then regime change is inevitable.
Okay, well, my position is pretty simple. While we emphasize self-reliance on our people to take care of themselves, instant pro-choice of their investment, of their lives, right? But at the end of the day, the government must be ready to supplement, whether it's healthcare or retirement financing. It must be ready to come up with money and not try to push it to share risk, and that's it. This is none of their business, right? That is the bottom line. The government must be ready to finance it at any time of the year if anybody fall through the traps, right? The second thing is about this healthcare universal medical insurance. I agree with that, but it must include the foreigners. The reasons are being simple. If we are having an aging population, and these foreigners are the working population in our society, they are expected to be generating the money and putting into the pool to address the concerns of the uncertainties of our people of a high healthcare cost. So that is the way that foreign talent can contribute to our society, to our people. If you pull that in, I think we have more than enough for our people to deal with our healthcare costs in terms of universal healthcare insurance. Now, universal healthcare insurance is to manage the risk of health by having an insurance. And only through that, people will have a peace of mind that we can plan according to what we want in our choices. Right? That is the only thing that is feasible, but it must include the foreigners, the working population from foreigners.
If I'm not wrong, I think my experience in Australia was that even as students, we do have to
Yes.
yeah, so some
Yes.
amount to it.
Yes. Even in Taiwan, the foreigners that are working there,
They pay.
they're covered, they pay. And the families are covered. Yeah, that should be the way that we should proceed. And dealing from the CPF, which is focused on our retirement financing. And we must be pro-choice. Transparency can only come when you have a choice. Right? Yeah.
Yeah. I just want to sort of recap, the SDP position that I mentioned in the front. I mean, our view is that, the CPF fund, should be decoupled. Healthcare and housing, healthcare, universal healthcare insurance, and once that is in place, the Medisave that is currently there will kick back into the ordinary account. That's one. And for housing, we want to introduce the non-open market housing, where the land cost is not factored in because it's seen as a public good, and only materials and building and administrative costs. That will significantly also bring the price of housing down. Then we can keep retirement fund solely for retirement purposes. Now, while the suggestions are out there, it remains to be seen, whether this will be put into play. So ultimately, I think Singaporeans will have to decide what kind of policymakers they want representing them in Parliament, and who would attend Parliament without absentees. I think
That's actually another forum.
yeah, but I was going to end by just saying that he opened a Pandora's box, talking about population and foreigners, and I guess that can be one of the many other forums
Yeah.
TOC can host.
Yeah, I mean, we'll definitely try as much as possible. I think just like to quickly wrap up. I mean, a lot of ideas here. We definitely want to send this on to MOM and CPF to basically and let them know this is what we have thought of so far. Different ideas, different suggestions. I think from Ming Sing
Will
to
you be
Kenneth.
putting it out to the public? as
Yes,
well?
it will be out to the public. Yeah, we just send them the links.
Right.
Yeah, so
It's regrettable, but the PAP there were no representatives from the government. Because we didn't get the other side of it.
we have invited them. We have invited them.
Read the straight
No, they couldn't make it in Parliament.
No, they couldn't get it debate.